36,000 years ago, a pact was struck. On the frozen plains of the Paleolithic, humanity forged an alliance not with its own kind, but with the wolf. An epical decision whose distant, almost comical echo is the lapdog in a knitted sweater. Go! The wild sheep surrendered its freedom. Then the goat, the cow, and the horse. With breathtaking speed, our ancestors began to edit the blueprint of the natural world, transforming wild beasts into living tools. We bent nature to our will, yet the wild was not entirely broken. A vast and magnificent menagerie remained untouched. The dinosaurs, of course, were ghosts of a former world. Their reign long concluded before our own began. But what of the others? The formidable bear, the fleet-footed gazelle, the zebra, the bison, creatures that shared our landscape, that were hunted and feared and revered. Why did they never cross the threshold into our world of fences and farms? The story of domestication is not one of conquest, but of consent. It is the story of why some animals agreed to work for humanity and why others refused. To understand the refusal, we must first understand the bargain. It began with the wolf, drawn to the periphery of human encampments. Our ancestors, having felled a colossal bison, would carve away the choicest parts, the tongue, the hump rich with fat, and leave the massive carcass behind. From the shadows, the wolves would emerge. A silent understanding was reached. The humans provided a surplus. The wolves provided sanitation, cleaning the camp of rotting flesh. Over generations, the most curious and least aggressive wolves thrived, their descendants growing ever closer. Two apex predators learned to hunt not as rivals, but as partners. A man with a spear and a wolf with its teeth. Now, consider the bear, a solitary monarch of the wilderness. The fantasy of Neanderthals riding cave bears is precisely that, a fiction. For the bear is not a social creature. It has no pack hierarchy for a human to infiltrate, no alpha to usurp. It is an individualist, powerful, and profoundly unpredictable. Even today, handlers who raise them from birth will attest, a bear is never truly tame. It can obey, but it does not submit. It is a force of nature, temporarily contained, but never conquered. But aggression is not the only barrier. The Near East was home to the fallow deer and the gazelle, two of the primary prey species for early hunters. We domesticated their neighbors, the aurochs into cattle, the mouflon into sheep. Yet these two remained forever wild. The reason lies in their fundamental biology. The fallow deer is a browser, not a grazer. It feeds on leaves and shoots in dense thickets. Confine a herd, and they will systematically strip the foliage, peel the bark, and destroy the very environment that sustains them. Their nature works against the logic of agriculture. The case of the gazelle presents an even more dramatic, almost comical obstacle. A gazelle can leap 5 meters into the air. Imagine an early Neolithic farmer painstakingly erecting a fence of wood and stone, a barrier meant to define the very boundary between the wild and the tame, only to watch his entire herd sail over it with effortless grace. The technology to contain such an animal simply did not exist, and so the world we inherited was shaped by a grand negotiation. It was a process of trial and error, an intricate dance between human ambition and animal nature. We did not simply choose our companions. They, in their own way, chose us. The line that separates the barn from the forest, the pasture from the savanna, was not drawn by humanity alone. It is a frontier defined as much by the animals we tamed as it is by the indomitable spirit of those who, for reasons of their own, would forever remain wild. It is an image of pure, untamable speed. Bring a gazelle to an enclosure, and it will not be contained. In a single fluid motion, it clears the barrier, a fleeting specter of muscle and bone. Once it tastes freedom, it is gone forever. It is the fastest of its kind, a creature born of the open plain, a challenge that humanity has long sought to master. The dream is an ancient one. On the frescoes of the Egyptian pharaohs, we see them, gazelles on leashes, a testament to a failed ambition. On the remote island of Socotra, they exist still, a population marooned in time. They could not have swum the vast ocean. They were brought there by people, a living echo of a forgotten experiment in domestication. The idea was there, the attempt was made, but the wild spirit of the gazelle refused to be broken. This failure raises a profound question, one that lies at the very heart of our civilization. Why the horse and not the zebra? They are close relatives, born of the same equid family, painted by nature with different coats. Yet one became our partner in building empires, while the other remains a symbol of the intractable African wild. The answer lies not in biology, but in temperament. The zebra carries within it a spirit of vicious, unpredictable aggression, a defiance that has rebuffed every human effort to place a saddle upon its back. Yet another of its cousins surrendered. The donkey, the humble ass, was a creature of the Near East and Africa, perfectly suited for partnership. It is an animal of practicality, not poetry. It eats whatever grows, thriving where others would starve. Crucially, it is a herd animal, its social instincts predisposing it to accept a leader, and its aggression is manageable, predictable. And so, the donkey was domesticated. It could not carry a warrior into a cavalry charge, nor race across a continent. A rider could sit upon its back, but not for long, and not at speed. It is small, resilient, but not powerful. It is, after all, a donkey. But upon its sturdy frame, we could load the goods of a burgeoning world, the patient engine of early commerce. The true revolution, the moment that would forever alter the trajectory of human history, came some 4,000 years ago. On the vast, windswept steppes of the southern Urals and northern Kazakhstan, a new pact was forged. Long before the cavalry charges of recorded history, the people of this land looked upon the wild horse not merely as a source of food, but as a vessel of power. This was no accident. It was a deliberate, focused endeavor. We know this from the archaeological record, from the specialized tools designed to shape bone and antler into the cheek pieces of a bridle, from the telltale wear on horse teeth from a bit. And then, they appear in the earth itself, in the solemnity of human burials. When a great chieftain died, his wealth was not counted in gold, but in hooves. He was laid to rest with his finest horses, sometimes by the dozen, to serve him in the next life as they had in this one. The moment the riders of the steppe mastered the horse, they were elevated above all their neighbors. The art of itself began to gallop. Information, once carried at the speed of a human runner, now flew across continents. Goods, armies, ideas, all began to move at a pace previously unimaginable. The plow could be pulled faster, turning more earth, feeding more mouths. Conquests became grander, empires vaster. In a very real sense, the modern world was forged in the heat of a horse's breath. For proof, we need only look to the sands of Egypt. A great civilization had risen there, one of pyramids that scraped the heavens and pharaohs who ruled as living gods. But they had no horses. Then, from the Near East came a people known as the Hyksos, and they brought with them a terrifying new weapon, the horse-drawn chariot. Against this unprecedented mobility and shock, the grandeur or culture or a larger army, but by a people who had harnessed the power of the horse. Centuries later, the same story would play out across an ocean. When the conquistadors arrived in the Americas, they were a mere handful of men confronting empires of millions. The Aztec and the Inca commanded vast territories, with sophisticated societies and immense armies. The Spanish were not stronger, not wiser, not more numerous. But they had horses. To the peoples of the Americas, who had never seen such a beast, the man and horse appeared as one terrifying creature, a centaur of steel and flesh. A few dozen cavalrymen could shatter the lines of thousands of warriors. The psychological and tactical advantage was absolute. Empires fell. The horse is more than a beast of burden or an instrument of war. It is a catalyst. It extended the reach of our limbs, the speed of our thoughts, the scope of our ambitions. It collapsed the vast distances of the world, transforming the landscape of human interaction forever. The story of civilization is inextricably bound to the thunder of its hooves, a rhythm that still echoes through the deepest corridors of our shared past. Below them, a sea of shaggy heads and thundering hooves, the great bison herds of the American plains. This is the image of a people, a culture, an entire era, etched into the world's collective memory. And it is almost entirely a mirage. This entire culture, this iconic, horse-mounted, bison-hunting society of the Plains Indians, flickered into existence and was extinguished in the span of a single human lifetime. Barely 30 years. It was a fleeting golden age, born from a chance encounter and erased by an inevitable one. Before the arrival of the horse, a creature brought by European invaders, the Great Plains were a different world. For a human on 2 feet, the bison was a 4-legged avalanche of muscle and fury. To hunt it was a desperate, dangerous affair of driving herds over cliffs or into traps. The prairie was too vast, the animal too fast, too powerful. A sustainable life was possible, but not the explosive, nomadic freedom that would come to define them. Then, the horse arrived. Escaped from the Spanish conquistadors in the south, these animals spread north, moving from tribe to tribe. For the people of the plains, it was not merely a new tool, it was a revelation. The world exploded in a vibrant, thundering renaissance. Horsemanship became a high art, a spiritual bond between rider and beast. Tribes that were once semi-horses created new hierarchies. A culture was born in the saddle. But the same forces that delivered this miracle would also deliver its doom. Soon after the horse came the European settlers, and they brought with them the rifle. The firearms spoke a language the horse could not understand, a language of industry, expansion, and extermination. The bison were slaughtered by the millions, not for sustenance, but for sport and policy. The 30-year flowering of the plains horse culture withered on the vine, vanishing as quickly and dramatically as it had appeared. This was not a tragedy confined to one continent's heartland. Far to the south, in the rugged landscapes of Chile and Argentina, the Araucanians and Patagonians also met the horse. They too were transformed into a formidable new power. They did not merely hunt, they waged war, raiding Spanish settlements with such ferocity that they halted the colonial advance for centuries. They were on the cusp of forging an empire from the saddle. But the equation of history remained brutally simple. Against cannons and repeating rifles, the bravest warrior on the fastest horse is still just flesh and bone. It begs a far deeper question. Why, across 2 vast continents, did this equestrian miracle have to be imported? The answer lies buried in the deep past, in a silence left by creatures that vanished millennia ago. Time the first humans crossed that same bridge in the other direction. They found a land that thundered with the footfalls of giants, mammoths, mastodons, and the very horses their descendants would one day rediscover. These early hunters were supremely skilled. In their desperate genius for survival, they hunted their future to extinction. The native horses, the mammoths, all were gone. By the time American civilizations rose and were ready for domestication, The prime candidates had already vanished. What remained was a menagerie of the untamable. The bison, a creature of pure, belligerent wildness, has resisted all but the most superficial attempts at domestication. The pronghorn antelope, a ghost on the wind, is the fastest land animal of the hemisphere, impossible to capture, let alone tame. Yet in the high, thin air of the Andes, a different story unfolded. Here, the llama and the alpaca were brought into the human fold. These are gentle, whimsical creatures, providers of warm wool for hats and cloaks, and beasts of light burden. But an alpaca has a weak spine. A llama cannot bear a heavy load, and it certainly cannot be ridden into battle. They breed slowly and thrive only in their specific mountain environment. They were companions for a mountain people, not engines for an empire. The proof of their limitations is stark. When the Spanish introduced the humble, adaptable sheep to South America, it swiftly rendered the native camelids a niche concern. If the Americas were a land of ghosts, Africa was a living museum of megafauna. A continent teeming with elephants, rhinoceroses, hippos, and vast herds of antelope and zebra. Why, then, did the cradle of humanity never produce a cavalry? The answer is not for a lack of trying, but because the continent's spirit of wildness refused to be broken. The zebra is not a striped horse. It is a creature of profound aggression, with a vicious bite and a lightning-fast kick, stubbornly refusing to be saddled. Even modern zoologists, with all their knowledge, have failed to domesticate them on any meaningful scale. The cult to manage. The war elephants of ancient Carthage were a brutal, short-lived experiment in taming individuals, not a true domestication of the species. And the hippopotamus? To ask why it was not domesticated is to misunderstand the hippopotamus entirely. It is one of the most dangerous and territorial animals on the planet. The destiny of civilizations was not written merely in the minds of men, but in the temperament of the beasts that walked beside them. The simple fortune of having aurochs that could become cattle, mouflons that could become sheep, and wild horses that were just pliable enough to accept a rider, granted the old world an advantage that would redraw the map of the planet. It was a lottery of domestication, drawn thousands of years ago, whose winning and losing tickets would determine the fate of continents. They claim more human lives on the African continent than the lion, the leopard, or any of the great predators. They are armored, territorial, and possessed of a primal fury that is never bent to the will of humankind. The rhinoceros, the hippopotamus, they are living monuments to the untamable. For thousands of years, we have shared the landscape with these creatures, yet they remain stubbornly, violently wild. The antelope and the gazelle, too, have resisted our grasp, their existence a high-strung symphony of instinct and flight, too swift and too skittish for the slow, patient process of domestication. But what if we could rewind the great clock of existence? What if the cataclysm that erased an entire kingdom of life had never occurred? Imagine a world where early humanity did not emerge into a land of mammoths and saber-toothed cats, but into the shadow of giants from a far more ancient epoch. If dinosaurs had survived, could we have tamed them? Picture the world of a primitive hunter. Your shelter is a cave carved from ancient stone, and grazing on the plains before you is not a herd of bison, but of triceratops. On the surface, this creature seems an ideal candidate. It is a herbivore, a social animal living in vast herds, with the bulk and power of a modern elephant. Why would this magnificent beast not become humanity's greatest ally? The first insurmountable barrier is found within its heavily armored skull: intelligence. The brain of a dinosaur was astonishingly small, a tiny knot of ganglia tasked with piloting a body of immense tonnage. To attempt a negotiation with a triceratops would be a dialogue with a living mountain. It would possess none of the cognitive flexibility of a cow or a horse. It would simply fail to comprehend the commands, the rewards, the very concept of a partnership. It would see a human not as a potential master, but as an irrelevant, fleeting presence on the periphery of its world. The second problem is one of life itself, the pace of reproduction. Dinosaurs were creatures of the egg. A single female could lay a clutch of many, and a herd could pepper a landscape with countless nests. For domestication to succeed, humans must control the breeding process, selecting for desirable traits over generations. To manage the explosive, decentralized reproduction of a dinosaur herd would be a biological lottery far too vast for any single tribe to oversee. Each clutch would be a wild gamble, a return to a genetic baseline we could never hope to shape. And finally, there is the simple, brutal reality of scale. A mature Triceratops weighed over 5 tons. To sustain such a colossal frame required a constant, voracious consumption of vegetation. A single family of hunter-gatherers, or even a small clan, could never provide the sheer acreage of forage required. One such beast would strip their ancestral lands bare in a matter of weeks, transforming a potential asset into an ecological catastrophe. But let us assume, against all logic, that a human tribe somehow succeeded. They raise a Triceratops from a hatchling. What then? Its spine, a fortress of interlocking vertebrae, was never meant to bear a rider. And to harness it to a plow? One might as well try to yoke a rhinoceros. The creature's instincts, honed over millions of years, are for defense and herd behavior, not for labor. The first sign of perceived threat would not be obedience, but a 5-ton explosion of instinct. No. The great herbivores would have remained a force of nature, as untamable as a hurricane. Yet what of the hunters? What of the velociraptor? Cinematic legend has painted them as cunning, human-sized pack hunters. The fossil record, however, tells a far different and perhaps more interesting story. The true velociraptor was no larger than a turkey, its bones light and its body cloaked in a coat of feathers. It was, in essence, a terrestrial bird of prey. And can a bird of prey be tamed? The answer, for millennia, has been yes. Humanity mastered the art of falconry, forging a partnership with hawks and eagles. We learned their ways, their instincts, and bent them to our purpose. So, in theory, a skilled human hunter could have trained a velociraptor. It could have become a lethal partner in the pursuit of small game. But this would not be domestication in the way we understand the dog. The social structure of a wolf, which allowed it to integrate into a human family, was alien to these creatures. The partnership would be one of utility, a fragile pact, not a bond of loyalty. It could never offer the companionship of the canid that would one day lie by our fires. Had the dinosaurs survived, our world would be enriched not by saurian companions, but by a strange hybrid of primeval falconry and sprawling reptilian ranches, akin to modern ostrich farms. With the ghosts of the dinosaurs laid to rest, we turn our gaze to our own time and ask, is the age of domestication over? The great audit of the animal kingdom appears to be complete. Everything that was useful, manageable, and profitable, the cow, the sheep, the pig, the chicken, was brought into the fold centuries ago. Now, we are merely filling the margins. We domesticate rats, but for laboratories. We raise ferrets and minks, but for their fur or as novelties. The new wave of domestication is not for partnership, but for amusement or niche markets. We seek out exotic lizards, the silent patience of a praying mantis, the alien architecture of a cockroach, keeping them not as helpers, but as living curiosities. Some futurists even whisper that these insects may one day be our agriculture, a new form of livestock for a crowded world. But perhaps the next chapter involves no living creature at all. Instead of bending the will of an animal, we are learning to bypass it entirely. The technology to grow meat in a laboratory, a harvest of pure protein divorced from a central nervous system, from consciousness, from suffering, already exists. This is the final frontier of domestication, the taming of the cell itself. Humanity's long and often brutal quest for dominion over the natural world may be culminating not in a planet of tamed beasts, but in a world where the very concept of the animal is rendered a choice. It is a testament to an ingenuity so profound, it threatens to sever the last threads connecting us to the wild, chaotic, and beautiful heart of the world we fought so long to conquer. A revolution is unfolding, almost imperceptibly. 30 years ago, a promise was whispered, a future where meat could be grown, not raised, available in every market. That future has not yet fully arrived, but the movement is undeniable. Within the lifespan of this generation, the cultivation of flesh in laboratories may shift from a scientific curiosity, a single morsel costing millions, to an industrial-scale reality, accessible to all. This represents a profound turning point in our history. For millennia, we have tamed the wild. Now, we stand on the precipice of creating the new. But what are the consequences of introducing a life form conceived entirely by human hands into an ecosystem billions of years in the making? Our current domestic animals are, in a sense, placeholders. They occupy the ecological niches left vacant by the giants our ancestors hunted to extinction. As humanity swept across new continents, the great megafauna vanished. We consumed the mammoths, the ancient bison, the wild horses. In their place, we put cattle, sheep, and the horses we had bred. If we now create something from scratch, a protein source with no evolutionary precedent, do we risk undermining the very foundation of our world? And since we are an inseparable part of that ecosystem, do we risk undermining ourselves? There is, of course, a utopian vision. A world where we transition to engineered meat, a food source without a nervous system, without suffering. The vast territories now dedicated to pasture and feed crops could be liberated, returned to their wild state. We could reseed the earth with the creatures we have driven to the brink, restoring a lost natural balance. With the power of genetic engineering, we could even resurrect the mammoth, bringing a lost majesty back to the Siberian steppe. In this scenario, humanity finally achieves a true harmony with nature, but this future is not guaranteed. Our past is a story of selection, not invention. We did not tame the dinosaur, for the simple reason that 65 million years of silence separated our species. And even if they had survived, they were too vast, too dangerous, their minds a fortress we could never breach. Domestication was a dance of opportunity and consent. The wolf drew close to the fire. The wild horse yielded to the human hand. But the zebra, the gazelle, the triceratops, they remained forever wild. This was the unwritten law of nature. Now, we are preparing to write our own laws. We are moving beyond the act of taming and into the realm of creation. The ancient pact between human and animal is ending, and we are stepping into a new role, not as shepherds of the natural world, but as its architects. The question is no longer what we can control, but what we dare to become.